We're super glad to have you with us. And we have the leadership team members here with us for the Cape Fear chapter. We're all in the teal shirts, most of us. Great group of people, so I hope everyone will interact with you and introduce themselves. ACAP's mission is to provide information, resources, support, and develop a sense of community for caregivers. So each month we have a specialty program, and on the table in front of you, we have copies of our 2023 schedule. I think it's through June. We're going to talk about that at the end of tonight. And then we have a feedback form for today's program, which helps us gather information about what we liked, what we can improve on, and then any feedback that we always share with our guest speakers to help them know how the information was received and what they can add to their program. And then there is a small slip of paper that asks for your information, personal information, if you would like to be included on our mailing list. So please leave that for us on the table if you so desire. Our guest this evening, our program is called Trip of a Lifetime, Preventing Falls by Aging Loved Ones. And our presenter tonight is Dr. Jeff Weisler. Jeff is a native of North Carolina and grew up in Raleigh, but he visited Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach often as a child. He enjoys surfing, paddleboarding, hiking, and boating. And it says with his friends and family, plus his dog and first mate, Shelly. So Dr. Weisler graduated from UNCW with a bachelor's in psychology, later receiving a doctorate in physical therapy from Elon University. And then once he graduated, he worked in Raleigh in an outpatient land and aquatic PT clinic to gain additional expertise and became an aquatic therapy and rehabilitation instructor, certified in that. And then he returned to Wilmington and he worked in 2 short-term rehab facilities in the area. And that's where he grew to love interacting with older adults and enjoyed learning about the life lessons and experiences that they were having. He noticed that how many seniors were reporting feeling increasingly unsteady on their feet and experiencing difficulty getting around. And they self-acknowledged, gradually becoming very sedentary, which obviously led to more functional decline. So many reported suffering falls and fractured bones, and that's how he had the impetus to realize he could have an impact on the outcome of those falls and helping them to stay functional for as long as possible. So he opened, to address those needs, he founded Wrightsville Beach Physical Therapy in 2017 and was pleased to be able to bring to the Wilmington area the 100% personalized physical therapy experiences that is a concierge-style practice. So his company, Wrightsville Beach Physical Therapy, provides in-home patient physical therapy services to people in Wilmington, Leland, Ogden, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach, Curry Beach, and Monkey Junction, Figure 8, Landfall, and the Wilmington side of Brunswick County. So he's going to share with us his presentation this evening. We're going to ask that if you have questions, jot those down. So he wants to give the full attention to the questions at the end of the presentation. So glad you're with us. Dr. Weisler?
Thanks so much. I think it was the last one, right? All right. Well, thank you for that great introduction, Ruth. And thank you all for being here tonight. Again, we're talking about preventing falls by our aging loved ones. And my presentation today is primarily just for educational purposes and should not be considered personal medical advice. Always be sure to check with your own medical care providers for recommendations that may be specific to your loved ones. And this is basically an overview slide. As you all know, as our parents age, they are more prone to falling for a number of reasons. Often the fall results in significant injury requiring immediate medical attention, and all too frequently falls have lasting effects requiring long-term rehabilitation services, seriously affecting an old person's mobility, ADLs, and independence. A fall may even result in permanent health issues, as well as changes in mobility, balance, confidence, and their independence. The good news is that many of these falls can be prevented and are preventable. Therefore, making even the slightest changes now can prevent those harmful and long-lasting effects. Even making changes in their home can reduce their risk and the main goal is helping them remain safe and independent and living in their homes as long as possible. All right. This will also help adult children understand movement and mobility challenges as their loved ones age and offer specific and proactive tips for preventing falls in the home and in the community. All right, participant learning outcomes. The relationship between aging, mobility, balance, physical activities, and falls. Strategies to assess a parent's personal and environmental risk factors for these falls, and specific and practical tips for preventing falls. All right, just a little statistics to start off with. Each year, 1 in 4 adults over age of 65 will experience a fall. About 3 million or more are treated for fall-related injuries in the emergency departments. And this is, again, in the U.S. Globally, I want to say it was around maybe 36 million, if I remember correctly, globally. So it's a very large number when you factor that in as well. 20 to 30% of people that do suffer a fall will experience and suffer pretty significant injuries. Sometimes that can be bruises, broken bones, and fractures, and traumatic brain injury as well. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death among adults over 65 years of age. All right, consequences. If you're lucky, you may get by with just scrapes, bruises, and soreness. However, the unfortunate ones experience fractures. Oftentimes it's a fractured hip, sometimes an ankle. They may roll their ankle when they trip and fall. They could fracture their ankles. Sometimes if they lock their arms out, they could end up with broken wrist, sometimes shoulder injuries, shoulder dislocations, and even depending on the nature of the fall, they could also end up fracturing their pelvis. There are some cases where people may fall on something hard like this and end up damaging or fracturing a rib. Head trauma is also another big concern. Say if you were to fall head first down a flight of stairs, that could have pretty serious effects and lead to a lot of head trauma, which could in turn lead to internal bleeding and traumatic brain injury. So our goal again is to prevent that from happening the best we can. Let's see. And ultimately a consequence of fall that's may not be visible, but is the decreased quality of life secondary to they'll develop sometimes a fear of falling. And sometimes this can be just as devastating. They will also often restrict their activity level, both at home and in the community, becoming more sedentary, often giving up participation in hobbies, even community activities, going to church and other events. And therefore they become further isolated from their social network and have a greater sense of loss of independence. So again, that's why it's so important that we help people prevent this from happening, keep them as active as possible, and hopefully reduce their risk of falls. Another consequence is sometimes, I want to say statistics, about 40 or 50% of nursing home admissions following hospitalization are as a result of a fall. Mortality is also a great concern. The age-adjusted fall death rate for older adults is 64 deaths per 100,000. All right, risk factor assessment. The single and biggest number one risk factor is a history of falls. That has been shown to be, I guess, correlated very highly to the risk of an additional fall in the future, often in the same year. The three key questions to ask, and when you're assessing your family member, is: have you fallen in the past year? Do you feel unsteady when standing or walking? And do you worry about falling? These can all be kind of telltale signs that can kind of guide you into trying to take these appropriate steps that I'll discuss later today to help keep them in the right direction and prevent future falls. And falls are typically a result of a combination of elements, which both intrinsic and extrinsic factors, as well as their mental state at the time and tons of other issues. So we'll get to that right now. All right. Intrinsic fall risk factors. The number one thing is with age. As folks age, overall is correlated to a higher increased risk for falls. Oftentimes difficulty getting around and decreased mobility are other good signs and kind of lead towards that greater risk. Oftentimes that'll be due to chronic pain. And with chronic pain, what you'll notice is typically they'll have altered movement patterns. It sometimes can be self-restricted activity. Their decreased strength, power, and joint stiffness, and loss of range of motion because their knee hurts. So now they're no longer getting up as often as they should. They may stop walking around as often, and just overall becoming more sedentary. And even deeper is sometimes they'll be more inclined to take pain medications that can have more, I guess, detrimental effects and affect them in a lot of other ways other than just their knee hurts. So that's chronic pain is something that ideally we need to work on addressing, and hopefully without using opioids and other medicines that can have other non-desirable effects on them. Muscle weakness, decreased strength and power, obviously as they're not moving around as much and become less active. All of those things with age will go down as well. And oftentimes because they're less active, you're gonna see a lot more stiffness in their joints, and then they'll get tighter with their muscles. And when that happens, what you'll notice is, say if they have really tight hip flexors, they'll be more bent over. They won't be able to take as long as strides, and therefore shifts your body weight forward more, making you more prone to falling. Other tightness areas are often the calf or the ankle joint. They won't be able to bend their ankle as much to take longer strides. And also the ankle does play a factor in balance recovery strategies. So again, it all kind of ties together. And I guess going with that, I also already touched on a little bit of the altered posture. The more you're hunched over or bent over, that shifts your weight forward, making you more prone to falling forward. And it also affects your ability to recover your balance and kind of narrows your, I guess, ability to weight shift and regain your balance. As we age, other things that you'll notice changes in are a lot of decrease or decline in sensories, impaired processing and reaction time. And one of the key ones is vision. Specifically, cataracts, macular degeneration are very common. I think cataracts prevalence is about 91% of those over 75 years of age are more prone to have cataracts. And the thing with cataracts and macular degeneration is those two, more than any other visual conditions, do affect your depth perception. So therefore, they're probably less likely to notice that slight change in height of maybe a curb or even a slight change even on the surface. They may not be able to detect it visually, particularly in low light settings, making them more prone to fall. And while we're talking about vision, something else I would like to touch base on is glasses. Typically when they're outside, you want to avoid wearing bifocals or progressive lenses as they can also alter your depth perception, and that can result in a fall. Instead, consider talking to your eye doctor about getting maybe a second pair of glasses that will be a single focus lens, and therefore you'll be more set up for success when you're out in the community. All right. And then somatosensory loss. This includes typically diminished sense of touch, pressure, vibration, and also your ability to detect what angle your joints are in. That's kind of like a decrease in your proprioception, which is basically the sensation of what angle your, say your knee is in. They may not be able to tell their knee is not completely straight. It may be bent a little bit, but maybe their brain's receiving a signal, letting them know that their knee is straight. And therefore, they may not quite fully be able to adjust or accommodate for that change. And that can throw them off as well. And that can be common in diabetic neuropathy, arthritis, and especially those that have had knee or hip replacements, because it's now not their natural or knee, it's now an artificial knee. So some of those senses, and also with the surgery, it will kind of affect all those sensory components of the knee. Let's see. And this loss causes an increased reliance on their vision as well as their vestibular system, because they've had some of the somatosensory loss. So what you'll see is you may see increased postural sway, delayed muscle response during balance recovery task. Another thing is obviously vestibular. A lot of times the folks become more sedentary and more restricted in their neck movements. Therefore, their vestibular system sometimes is, becomes hypoactive. So it's not used to the stimulation of turning their head. And so when they have sudden movements or turn, their system is on high alert, or sometimes not nearly as active as it should be. And therefore, there's more delayed processing of that information that they're getting in from their environment, as well as their position in space. Hearing is another one that's, hearing loss is also associated with aging. And with that, what you'll have is sometimes more of that plays a factor more in terms of being startled. They may not hear someone walk in the room or somebody come up behind them. And all of a sudden they hear or see somebody beside them, and it just throws them off and may startle them. And sometimes that in itself can be enough to cause them to jump, and their body reacts faster than everything else can catch up and keep up. And therefore that can put you at increased risk for falls. So particularly when dealing with this population, obviously you can assist them with getting their ears checked. Maybe hearing aids might be beneficial. Just making it known that perhaps you're in the room, calling out a little louder from a distance, so you're less likely to startle them as you're approaching them. Orthostatic hypotension is also another factor with aging, or more common. That's basically a drop in your blood pressure after postural changes, and it's noted by a significant or marked fall in your systolic blood pressure of greater than 20 millimeters per mercury. And that's with your systolic blood pressure. Typically, most of the time, this will occur or be present when someone goes from sitting to standing, but it can also occur when you go from lying down to sitting up. And typically, it can be symptomatic or also asymptomatic. If it is symptomatic, typically what you'll notice, or they may report, is I feel dizzy, lightheaded when they first get up. And so typically, just a side note is whenever they're changing positions, I typically recommend that they try to take their time getting up, changing positions, because that can also give their body time to adjust to those changes. And this kind of ties into our next slide, which is urinary incontinence is also a noted intrinsic fall risk factor. Typically at night or whenever they have the urge, they're more likely to jump out of bed. They're suddenly going from lying down at rest. They're suddenly changing positions, popping up, trying to make it across the room in the dark to the bathroom. Therefore, you're making yourself more at risk for the orthostatic hypotension, as well as your body hasn't had time to wake up and really fully be aware of the situation in your environment. And so some techniques that may help is sometimes people have done, even like if they're a gentleman, using a urinal, just having that at the bedside. Sometimes people have used even like a bedside commode if it's a recurring issue where they're having to get up several times throughout the night. Sometimes those can be beneficial. Sometimes they can be more detrimental. It really depends on the individual's situation and circumstances and how far they have to travel to get to the bathroom. Medications, 4 or more medications also is noted as an increased risk for falls. I strongly recommend that you inform your doctors as well as your pharmacist, not only of prescription medicines, but also over-the-counter medications, vitamins, supplements, anything else that you might be taking. There are a lot of herbals and stuff, and a lot of times seniors are prone to purchase anything that's advertised on TV. And so it may be something their doctors are not aware of at all, but it could have some interactions with their medications. And those could also put them at greater risk for falls. Let's see. And for the CDC, 3 out of 4 adults are taking at least one medication linked to falls and or car crashes. So it's pretty prevalent out there. So that's why it's such a good idea to check with your pharmacist and ask them if there's any medications that may make them more prone to falls, lightheadedness, dizziness, anything else that may increase or affect their alertness as well. Let's see. And cognitive impairments. There's a lot of these listed. Most of them will basically decreases your attention span and you'll have greater difficulty multitasking, or if you're in an environment with multiple stimulation and a lot of different things going on, sometimes that can be more challenging for them because when performing motor activity while cognitively tasked, oftentimes older folks are forced to prioritize one over the other, which can have detrimental effects and increase their unsteadiness and make them more prone to falls. Because suddenly they're thinking so hard about one task, they forget about taking that next step, or, oh yes, I was in the middle of stepping off a curb, or anything else like that. So that's where that comes in, and is so important. And chronic conditions such as dementia, stroke, MS, Parkinson's, peripheral neuropathy, and osteoarthritis are all shown to be also one of the relevant intrinsic fall risk factors that should be noted and taken into account. All right, now we're moving on to environmental kind of extrinsic factors outside the individual themselves. This is where we're getting more into situations where we have inadequate or dim lighting. This is very critical because now, going back to where we discussed vision earlier, now with the dim light, we have decreased visual acuity. It also affects their ability to determine depth perception, and it makes them even at greater risk of tripping, stumbling, and getting in danger. The majority of falls at home typically occur in the bedroom, followed by the bathroom. And typically falls occur during routine daily tasks, such as getting in and out of bed, a chair, bending over to pick up something, making directional changes, walking, and negotiating stairs. So this brings us into clutter. Sometimes a good majority of our clients will be holding on to keepsakes all their life, and it's kind of sometimes it gets overwhelming and clutters their environment, not only on the surface, but oftentimes it overflows onto their stairs, floor, around their room. And the biggest areas to focus on is making sure their main pathways are fairly clear and that stuff is organized and out of the way, particularly between the bed and the bathroom. That's going to be when they're already tired, out of it, it's darker environment. You want to make sure that pathway is as clear as possible. And anywhere else throughout the house, you want to make sure that they have plenty of room to move about, especially using a cane or walker, wheelchair, whatever assisted device it may be. That does require some additional room to maneuver. So just the more you can assist them in organizing, cleaning up, getting stuff off the floor, clearing their pathways, the better. And again, with clutter, this having cords and stuff throughout the house can also be another danger, and something that you want to try to help minimize and help them better organize it, cover it up, maybe sometimes switch to wireless options if that's an option, or running their extension cord behind something else out of the walking pathway. Let's see. All right, going on to the next one. A lot of times as folks get older, they'll have a tendency to want to grab onto things in their path or nearby for reassurance, even if they're not using it strictly for support or put their body weight on. It's still a good idea to go around and make sure you can kind of, if there is any furniture that's extremely wobbly, unsteady, super lightweight that they might grab onto and think it may give them some support, but it really doesn't. Typically, I would recommend removing that from their environment, or come up with a way to better secure it, so that they don't grab onto it thinking that they have support and all of a sudden it slides or takes off on them or tips over, because that can have devastating effects. Sometimes too, that could be even the chair they're sitting in. You want to try to help them pick a chair that's sturdy, stable, that won't slide, but has enough traction that it'll pretty much be there when they need it. And sometimes there have been cases where the clients in the past, I've actually assisted them in bolting their chair to the floor, because it was such an important issue to them. And they were oftentimes slide it or scoot it if like just putting rubber grip on the bottom of the chair did not help. There have been situations where family members and clients, the best and safest option has actually been to put even just one bolt through the back of the chair into the floor, so that way they can guarantee it doesn't slide, because a lot easier to patch wood than to patch or fix a broken bone. And then going on to stairs. With stairs, you want to make sure that the railings are secured, and that you can easily grasp them. One thing I've noticed with a lot of stairs is hazards are present when a handrail. Oftentimes you'll see handrails that are just way too big. They'll be 6 or 8 inches wide, and there's no way you can really grab onto it, especially as we get older. A lot of older clients will have their hand where it's partially flexed. They really can't even straighten it all the way anyway, or they have a hard time doing so. So just finding a handrail that's easy to grasp, they can get a really good hold onto it, just makes them feel a lot more secure and can make them a lot steadier when they're negotiating stairs. If they don't have 2 handrails, I oftentimes recommend they install a second rail for the other side of the stairway. That can be very beneficial as well. So they, regardless, say they were carrying something on this side, they don't have to worry about all of a sudden they're frantic trying to get in the house to go to the bathroom perhaps. And now it's like, all right, I got to stop, put my purse on the other side, transfer my groceries to the other hand. That way they'll be set up to have a handrail or something they can easily grasp on both sides of them. Let's see, stair nosing. Stair nosing is basically the overhang of a step. Some older homes, like you'll find like the stairs overhang will be pretty excessive. And why that's a risk is oftentimes you run the risk of getting your toe caught underneath it, and therefore you could trip when you're going up the steps. There are some ways to kind of modify that a little bit that are inexpensive. Like you can even have somebody come in and add almost like a wedge in the front of your step or tread, and that'll kind of decrease that depth and make you less likely to actually get your whole toe of your shoe caught underneath the lip of the step. And lack of visual contrast is another huge risk when you're talking about stairs. All right, uneven and slippery surfaces. You basically want to help your loved one work out for those, and pretty much we want to try to minimize those the best we can. Oftentimes what you're looking for is if you're out in the driveway, uneven driveway surface. Sometimes over years, even their driveways or sidewalks, the concrete may settle, and therefore you have where the concrete's raised up and elevated, and it just poses a particular trip hazard for them, particularly in lower light environments or at night or in the evening. There are ways to get that addressed. They can come in and basically lift the concrete up to make it more level again. So if it's gotten severe enough, that may be something well worth looking into. Also, if it's a deck, say they have a back deck, and or wooden steps, you want to check periodically to make sure the nail heads or screw heads are all the way down. That's one area that I've noticed over the years that sometimes can be a hazard. You wouldn't think it is, and it doesn't. It just seems so minor. But even just that one little nail head sticking up that catches their shoe at the wrong time could be devastating. So you just want to try to secure or tighten those or hammer them back down, and that can make a big difference. Also, over time, wooden decks and steps, you'll also see the wood start to bow and cup. That just creates, again, more of another trip hazard that we want to try to address ahead of time before it becomes an issue. And also any wet surface. Some surfaces are pretty good about having some traction characteristics built into them. So even if they are wet, they have really good traction. But it's those other areas that do not. We want to pay particular attention to those areas and try to address them ahead of time the best we can. Incorrect use of assisted devices, which I'll demonstrate later in this presentation. That can be a huge risk for falls. Yes, assisted devices can be very beneficial when used correctly. However, if they're not used correctly, they can also be potential hazards as well. Footwear is another issue that needs to be addressed. Oftentimes, people want to put on those comfortable old slippers or just their standard regular socks. And if you have wood floors or slick surfaces, that can definitely be devastating. You try to get up, you try to stop suddenly, make changes, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, your foot has slidden out from under you and you're on your back. Good news, and I guess the other thing too is also worn out shoes. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, these are great shoes. I've had these for, I think, my one of our relatives in the past. So I think he's like, oh, bragging. I've worn these shoes for 20 years now. Now they're great. Like their toes practically half hanging out the front of it. But they're like, yeah, they're great. And then you look at the tread, there's really no tread on it, no traction whatsoever. It's always good to try to assist them in finding shoes that'll be comfortable, practical for them, and something that they'll actually wear. It sometimes does come, or it does, sometimes it does help to actually discard their shoes, even though they may be upset with you. Sometimes it is deep in their best interest to discard them without them knowing it and replace them with something other than that, and because it really can be hazardous. Low transfer surface heights. That's also another area that we'll discuss on how to address and focus on. All right, lighting. All right, now we're moving on to steps we can take to minimize the risk. One of the first ones I would always recommend is addressing is lighting. If it's dimly lit, a lot of homes I've been into, clients have older light fixtures in there that are maybe only rated for, say, 40 watts. Fortunately, now with light bulb technology, you can get light bulbs that require a fraction of that amount of power, but provide a whole lot more lumens or brightness. And that can make a huge difference. So even just replace something as simple as replacing the light bulbs in their old lamps, light fixtures, can make a huge difference into how much light is available. And oftentimes it helps to remind them. A lot of times they're more financially conservative, especially when using lights. They think, all right, if I turn on a light bulb, it's gonna cost me $30 a day or something ridiculous. The good thing is with this improved technology, the amount of power you're actually drawing to power those light bulbs is pretty much almost negligible. It may be like 29 cents a day, sometimes for a 100-watt light bulb in New Hanover County, actually. So it's really not as expensive as they think. And also, in times, I find it helps if you really explain to them that the cost of them actually falling and getting hurt is far exceeds the cost of powering that light bulb or a couple extra light bulbs throughout the house. And it also could be like also prevent the loss of their independence. So when you kind of phrase it to them in that sense, they may be more open to leave a couple extra lights on whenever possible. And one thing that's also helpful is night lights. I strongly recommend night lights be installed sometimes in their hallways, bathrooms. I really like, it depends also on their sensitivity. Some folks have no problem sleeping if there's some lights left on. So in which case you may be better off also leaving the bathroom light on all the time. But it really, I find it's more of a personal thing. Some of them are extremely light sensitive and they cannot tolerate really any lights being on. They really need it to be dark, in which case I would recommend a motion censored night light. And I think you can even buy light bulbs that have motion censored capabilities built into them. And what that's going to do is that way when their feet do swing off the side of the bed, it'll turn on a light, so it at least gives them some sense of where they are in the room, a little bit more awareness of where their feet are, perhaps shoes, what direction they're headed. Just gives them a better foundation. In some situations, I've found it helpful to run an extension cord even underneath their bed so that there's a motion censored night light underneath the bed. That way it's not a trip hazard, but as soon as their feet swing off the bed, it automatically triggers that light to come on, and it at least gives them some start and some hope to be able to get up and get to the next outlet or next location where a motion sensor light could be placed. Sometimes the outlets are behind cabinets and stuff, so it's hard to really get a motion sensor light where you need it. That's why sometimes even using like the extension cord and putting it under their nightstand, somewhere out of their way where it's not going to pose a trip hazard, but it does help provide them with that little extra light. The other good thing too is now with technology, we have a lot more battery powered motion sensor lights. So in areas where there's no outlets whatsoever, where it wouldn't be safe or practical to run an extension cord, you can also look for those type of devices. Let's see. Night lights. I definitely recommend having a night light beside the bed if you can, or on their nightstand, somewhere where it's easy for them to reach. If it's on their nightstand at the far end, they may be more likely to reach way too far off the side of the bed to turn it on, and may run the risk of also falling off the bed trying to turn on the light. I know a lot of folks now are getting more tech savvy, so a lot of them can use Alexa to help turn on or do some of the tech savvy automations in their home. That can also be very helpful for those that may be open or have the capability and the wherewithal to work in that direction. Let's see. Stair tread lights is an option. Sometimes you can get lights installed actually on the tread of the steps. And outside, solar powered outdoor lights, path lights can be beneficial. Even if there's perhaps they live in an older home and they don't have any actual floodlights installed on the home. You can also nowadays buy solar powered floodlights that can be motion activated as well. So that way they come home late from running errands, going out to bingo, whatever else it may be, that can automatically turn on the lights and help them be a little bit safer getting back to the house. That brings up the point of lighting automation options. A lot of times, a lot of the new light fixtures and features you can program to come on at certain times and to cut off at certain times. That can be very beneficial. That way it doesn't have to be any involvement on their part or your part to make sure that happens every day. automatically you could have it set up so the lights would turn on every day, say 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock this time of year, and stay on to, it's well past their bedtime. That's one way that you can take that out of the picture. The lights will automatically be on whether they wanted them on or not. It can kind of assist them and make that a much safer transition. Let's see. Here we go. As we touched on earlier, keep the items off the floor and rearrange furniture to allow for use of assistive devices, especially in their primary walking paths. Secure power cords and draperies out of their way so they will not trip on them. Pets. Due to proven social benefits of companionship and affection, keeping a beloved pet is valuable to a senior's health. But we do need to, with these pets, we do need to know and make sure that they know the basic commands such as off when they try to jump up on your loved one. If it helps, you can also get in-home training evaluations to kind of assist them in training the pet to not jump up on them, especially when they're standing or walking, or say they walk in the door. If they're already challenged and taxed, and then you just get up the steps and it's kind of maybe dark in there if you don't have automations, and then you have a dog jumping on you, that can pose a real trip hazard. Let's see. Also, it's important to know note where the dogs sleep. That can be even within a room. Say if you're always in the kitchen, the dog always typically lies in one area. You want to be aware of that. And that way, when they're doing things around in the kitchen or moving around, they don't forget that the dog is sleeping typically right by the microwave or wherever it may be. You definitely want to increase awareness of where the dog is at that particular time. Sometimes it may be beneficial to put the dog in a kennel or crate him, perhaps if your parent is up moving about, say in the kitchen or wherever it may be, if they're doing some task and it's really safer for the dog to be out of the way, you can ensure that's the case. Water bowls. You want to be aware of what location you place them in. Try to position those in areas that are out of the common pathway, and perhaps put a little non-skid mat underneath or something to help catch the water if there's any water to be splashed on the floor. Some dogs are really neat drinkers and eaters, and others are more like sprinklers and throwing water and swinging water all across the room. So something to be aware of. One thing else that may be helpful is to have a raised dog bowl or food bowl. So it will raise it up off the floor so that your parents not having to bend so far down to retrieve the bowl. That'll make it just a little bit easier on them as well. Let's see. And yes, and some dogs, you can actually train them to help you pick up items off the floor and train them to put up their toys and everything else, and also retrieve stuff, dump it in the waste basket, whatever. And if seniors show real interest, there are resources out there, books, videos, online trainings that can teach them how to personally work with their dog or pet and train them to perform certain tasks. It's not only beneficial for the individual themselves, but it can also be, helpful for the dog and entertain them, give the dog some stimulation as well, which is great for both parties involved. Other pet options sometimes would be maybe a bird or parakeet if there's a family member that could help. Sometimes just having that social interaction or something to care for or look at, such as like a fish or a bird. Sometimes that too can provide stimulation to those folks without being as much of a daily risk hazard. Flooring. Remove throw rugs or at least secure the corners and edges. And I find this is one area that's often hard for folks to do. A lot of times there are a ton of oriental rugs and really big rugs that do pose a risk. So if there's anything you can do, if they're not willing to part with them, oftentimes if you can get some carpet tape or something, or double-sided tape to help secure the edges down. That can at least try to minimize it. And also if you're looking for areas prone to get wet, try to replace the rugs with low-profile, non-skid door and floor mats. Some of them come with really neat and nice-looking styles these days, and they're extremely low-profile, almost like a tablecloth or placemat. I mean, and they can pose less of a trip hazard, but still serve the purpose of giving you some traction, grip, and keeping you safe. And let's see. There's also anti-slip tape, which you can get in both transparent. If sometimes it may be an issue where you don't want to ruin the look of your home. So some folks, they haven't been agreeable to have something that's so blatantly obvious, which is good. It would help them visually, but at the same time, sometimes you can compromise where you can get really nice transparent grip tape that can be used on the stairs, like especially on stair treads, or any area outside their bathtub, shower, even in the shower and bathtub. They do make them where they're waterproof. And there really are some that are out there that are really transparent. So it may be less of an issue for your loved one. They may be more willing to compromise and be open to that idea. If they do suffer with a lot of visual deficits, I highly recommend contrast tape. You can buy it in different colors, so it differentiates the edge of the step. Say if they have a step down into a lower room, you could also put it at the top step and maybe the bottom step even, especially for those that are visually challenged. Just anything that you can do to help distinguish where one area ends or another begins, or there's a height difference, that can make a big difference. Even something as simple as just like red electric tape or red tape, just even like just a small little strip, just to mark maybe an edge of a counter or something else where they may be more prone to step on. That can sometimes be enough of a visual clue to draw their attention. Like, okay, I got to transition from this surface to another surface. All right, stairs, keep them clutter-free and make sure the handrails are securely fastened. As I touched on earlier, you want to make sure that the handrails you can actually grasp, get a good hold of them. If they are made out of wood, maybe periodically check them to make sure they're sanded down and they're not likely to get splinters in their hands. Especially as we age, the skin gets fragile. And if they get a splinter in their hand, they'll be less likely to want to hold on to that rail in the future. So if we can kind of address that issue ahead of time, that can be very beneficial. And if you're doing new construction, I oftentimes recommend you consider adding a landing halfway up the steps. Not only does it give them a place to rest, say if they're carrying up something up the steps, they could set down their groceries or whatever it was that they were carrying for a brief moment, pause, rest. And it also serves the purpose of, heaven forbid, they do end up stumbling or tripping. Hopefully they won't make it down the entire flight of steps, but maybe just 2 or 3. So it's just one nice way you can kind of look into that and try to prepare it. Let's see. All right, and here's a slide where I have examples up here. Is the transparent grip tape up on the top left. And you can get the anti-slip tape as well. On the middle picture, those stairs have no real nosing. So there's nowhere really, the way they designed it, there's nowhere really for you to catch the toe of your shoe underneath it and trip yourself. Plus they use the grip tape to kind of define and give a visual cue as to where the edge of the step is. On the right, we got some non-slip carpet stair treads. They do come in different styles. And they basically adhere to it. That can be a safer option. And not only does it give you the traction, but also, again, the visual depth perception and makes it less slippery as well. All right, kitchen and meal prep. One step we can take here is to place frequently used items where they can easily access them without bending over, reaching into really high, or if they have to get a step ladder or step stool to get stuff off the top. And if they use it regularly, try to help them rearrange their cabinets so that they can put it where they can reach it easily without having to bend over and really dig or reach underneath the cabinet, which may make them lightheaded or dizzy, or stand up on their tippy toes, or get up on a step stool. And also, when it comes to meal prep and they're maybe moving things around, if they use an assisted device, I oftentimes recommend they have drink holders that can attach to your walker, wheelchair, that you can carry your drink in, so they have their hands-free to use the assisted device. And you can also get little trays that'll go across the walker so they can help transport food and stuff to their sitting area. Common household chores: washer and dryer, especially if you're using your front load washer and dryer. You can now buy little stands that will raise it up a little bit so that your loved one is not having to bend over to the extreme and really dive into it. It brings it up a little bit more to a safer level where they're not having to really extremely squat and crouch down or bend over, which can increase or decrease their risk for falls by doing that. Vacuuming. The nice thing about that, we now have Dyson and other cordless vacuum cleaners that are lightweight. So what you're doing with that is they're battery powered. You're doing away with the cord. That can be a real big trip hazard. And a lot of times the older vacuums are extremely heavy. So now you have something heavy they're trying to push or negotiate around the house. And then also you have the extension cord or power cord that you're dragging behind that you can trip on. Even mopping and stuff, rather than using a mop pail and a mop, now you can get the Swiffer mops, where it's pretty much, it doesn't saturate the floor. And there's not a ton of water going everywhere. They're not splashing and soaking everything. You can get just a Swiffer mop or even duster, and that can help decrease their risk in that area as well. Gardening carts, just like pictured here. That's a very fancy high-tech garden cart. It doesn't have to be that extreme, but something like that could just help your loved one remain active in their garden, but at the same time giving them a place to sit down and rest while they're working at lower heights, and can make them safer. As always, I strongly recommend seniors carry a cell phone or a cordless phone at all times. Oftentimes when the phone rings and it's across the house, regardless of what they're doing, they want to drop it, run over there, and answer the phone. Unfortunately, most of the time it's just telemarketers nowadays. But it does pose a risk. So the more you can get them to carry their cell phones, not only to answer calls, but also in the case of emergencies, that is great. All right, common high-risk areas and solutions. Now moving on to the bathroom. We got ideally install ADA height commodes, unless your loved one is 4 foot 5. Ideally, a raised commode will make the surface higher for them to transfer from and make it safer for them. They'll be less likely to flop down on it and have less difficulty getting up. If it's too low, there are various options. You can get a 3-in-1 commode, which is basically a standalone bedside commode. Sometimes that could be placed over top of your existing commode. If you're in a rush and don't have time to swap out the commode or toilet, you could at least do that in the time being until you can have a plumber come out to swap out the commodes. There are also riser seats that will actually, there are some that just bolt on. There are some other nicer ones that not only do they bolt on, but they also have a plastic piece on the inside of the seat that will grasp the inside of the bowl, so it's less likely to slide loose and pivot over time. And that helps a lot. Some of them even have armrests built in, and that would be appropriate. That would be appropriate if they currently don't have any grab bars. Temporarily, it'll give them somewhere to grab onto or hold onto to help assist them in lowering themselves down as well as getting up. Let's see. Wet slippery floors. As we talked about earlier, you want to look for mats that are low profile, non-slip bath mats, or the grip tape that we talked about. Shower and bathtub. They do have new technology, or not new technology, but you can also purchase nowadays, as you've seen advertised, a lot of times they have the walk-in side entry bathtubs. That's definitely makes it a lot easier and safer for folks to get in. But there are other cheaper options as well, so they can continue to use a regular bathtub, which I'll show you in my next slide. You can also get shower chair and transfer tub bench options. I do recommend a shower wand. They can really help them with hygiene, but as well as get the water where they need it. A lot of times, sometimes even the rain heads, they're just constantly getting bombarded with water, and it makes it harder for them to see and carry on and do their bathing without getting water and soap in their eyes. And they have a harder time keeping their balance with their eyes closed. So if you end up with a shower wand or something where you can direct the water where you want it, so it's not hitting them in the face, they're more likely to keep their eyes open, get those visual cues and sensory input they need to help keep them safer. And also control valve placement. If you're doing a new build, you may have a say in where the shower valves go. Sometimes it is helpful to put those near the entrance of the shower. That way you can adjust the water temp before you get in, and they don't have to be directly standing under the water. It's cold, they try to react real quick and jump out of the way. They can at least adjust the water temp before they get in it, let the water warm up before they get in. This can also be helpful too if you're ever a caregiver for them, or they would ever have a caregiver in the house to assist them, because then the caregiver is less likely to get soaked trying to adjust and turn on the water. I highly recommend curbless or low threshold entry showers. You're just minimizing the, trying to minimize them having to step high over a threshold or do anything that would put them at greater risk for falls. Grab bars, you can put them and recommend inside and outside the tub, shower, beside the commode. There are various types, which we'll go over in a second. All right, this next slide is on a sliding transfer bench with the swivel seat. This is one I helped a client get recently, and it is the best product I've seen for this purpose. They are thrilled with it. The caregivers are thrilled with it. It is extremely comfortable. It's padded both in the seat, the back, the armrest. The nice thing here is it has a lever so you can actually swivel the entire seat. So that way when they sit on it, they can actually use their walker or wheelchair and actually sit on it facing directly out. They're not having to sit like sideways and then try to shove or slide, I guess, into the tub. They actually sit on it, and it's also on a track. So once they start to pivot, you can assist them in lifting their legs over the side of the tub, and then the whole seat will slide from the left to the right of the device to actually get them all the way centered in the center of the tub without having to worry about wear and tear or skin tears sliding on a hard plastic bench. This has probably been one of the greatest products I've recommended recently. So I'm excited to show it off and share it with you because I really think it can make a big difference on someone that still needs to shower or get in the bathroom. All right, here's an example of wall-mounted grab bars. In this particular case, this home was extremely old and it had narrow doorways and passageways, so they could not accommodate a full-size wheelchair and even like their full-size walker and stuff. They could maybe get it in there, but they couldn't turn it to negotiate it into the, I forgot what you, like the toilet stall or a toilet room. So in the first picture here, we actually had to take off the door to the little toilet room because the door went open inward. And when that happened, there was no room for them to actually turn around and negotiate or have a caregiver system. So basically, we installed grab bars from the outside from the base of the bedroom, so they could basically leave their wheelchair or walker outside, go from one grab bar to the next, to give them that independence and freedom to be able to do so safely. And I kind of continue the grab bars on across the room to also assist them in getting to the shower. So we did 2 grab bars right beside the commode on either side. Did them outside there so they could hold on to the one on the left as they reached for the one on the right. And that we found this was the best solution or situation or best solution for this particular case. All right. And then this is a flip up grab bar. And I'll describe this one in 1 second. All right, in this particular situation, it was a glass shower door. So there was nowhere to really mount a standard grab bar beside the commode. And also there wasn't really a good spot to have a grab bar to help them get into the shower. So this is like an extended long grab bar. I want to say this one might have been 42 inches long, but the nice thing is it was dual purpose here. It was beside them for getting off the commode. They had something sturdy to get on or hold on to, but then also when they were going to get into the shower, they could still use it at the same time for support as they stepped in until they were able to grab the other grab bar inside the shower. That was mounted on the left side. It does fold up out of the way, as you can see in the middle picture. So it does get out of the way, so it's easier to clean. When not in use, it makes it, I guess, it can be a little nicer for everyone else. And this is just for a little humor. My doctor said now that I'm older, I need to install a bar in the shower. Sometimes that can be interpreted in many different ways. So that's why I wanted to touch on the different types of grab bars that I am actually referencing. All right, and this is just an example of one of the toilet risers that bolts onto the commode that does have the handles built into it. They're great if you need them, but you're ultimately going to get more stability actually having a grab bar mounted to the wall, but that's not always available or not something practical for everybody. So this is another alternative. Some of the ones that you see will have arms that bolt onto the side and extend out to the side. One thing to watch with those is if the feet of the armrest stick out too far into the room, they could pose a trip hazard. So you want to be mindful for that when you're selecting one. All right. Bed, when you're talking about the bedroom, the height, sometimes the bed may be extremely too tall for someone, and therefore they're at risk of sliding off the bed. So they try to get up there, but they don't quite make it over the lip or the edge of the bed. They may be likely to slide off the edge. Sometimes you can remove the box springs, remove part of the feet of the frame. And if the bed's too low, you can use bed risers. And this is just an example of one of the bed risers. You can buy it probably at Walmart or any store really, and just the regular frame fits on top of that. While I have this out, I'll go ahead and say this can also be used oftentimes with a chair. If you have like a recliner or even a sofa, you can get several of these for all the feet of the sofa and chair, and that can raise that up a little bit higher to make it safer for them as well. And there are bed rails or handles you can get for the bed. And most importantly, placement in the room. Sometimes the bed may not be oriented the best way to allow them freedom of movement and a direct path to their bathroom. So sometimes even changing the bed placement in the room can give them a more direct path and ease of access. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I just realized look, this particular grab bar. This is a suction grab bar. It can be used in showers. I will caution you that they're not for someone needing a lot of pressure or force or really needing to pull on something. These are more suited for someone that has a tendency to want to just steady themselves just a little bit, and their balance overall is pretty good. This may be a good temporary solution until a grab bar could be installed. Some of these do have nice features where this one will turn red if it doesn't have a good seal or suction on it. So that's if you do end up needing to go this route temporarily, that's something you can look for. It'll be green if it's got a really good suction on it. So it'll have an indicator there. So just something that a lot of times people are like, what does that mean? Or it actually indicates how well it's adhered to the wall. So it is something that you will need to check periodically if your loved one is using them, because they do lose their suction over time, and it's something you definitely want to check on. Again, I only recommend these for people that are really high level and doing pretty well and really just need something for more reassurance than actual assistance and support. And let's see. All right, and this, while I have this on the slide, this is an example of a tension-mounted floor-to-ceiling transfer pole. The nice thing is you can use this pretty much anywhere. I want to say the range on some of these nowadays will go from like 7-foot ceilings up to 10-foot ceilings. The nice thing is they can either be permanently mounted to the floor and ceiling, or say if your loved one's at a place that or property that they don't own and you don't want any permanent damage, this will actually work based on just tension alone to the floor and ceiling can be very beneficial and can be placed where you need it. Even the sofa, you can put it by the bed and in the bathroom. This is when I was searching, I found a bed rail that actually has a motion sensor light built into it that's battery powered. And I think actually rechargeable. You can recharge it and power it, but it's built into the actual bed rail itself. It just gives them something a little bit to hold on to as they first get up and steady themselves. And it has an automatic light. If you are using a bed rail, there are some that work better than others. Some of them are more securely fastened that actually strap around the bed themselves. So if your loved one needs a little bit more assistance and really is more likely to pull on something to assist them, you want to make sure you have one that's securely wrapped around the frame or the mattress. Some of them out there will just slide under the mattress. And if they're likely to be standing and really pull on it from outside of the bed, they're more likely to pull it out from under the mattress. All right. This is chairs. If the height's too low, you want to consider a lift. You may consider a lift chair, use furniture risers, or mount the recliner chair or other chair to a raised platform, which I'll demonstrate in my next slide. Other things to consider when you're looking at what surface that your loved one likes to sit in. Does it swivel? Is it steady? Is it tippy? Those are all kind of factors that you want to consider and look into because that can play a part as well. And here I have an example of what's called the Able Tray table with handle. Your sofa or chair actually rests on top of it, or it can also be the bed. You can put that by the bed as well. So it gives a lot of support and a lot of stability and could assist someone that does need a little bit of extra assistance and support when getting up. All right. These are some basically a DIY chair riser I assisted an individual with. So it was his recliner chair was too low. He didn't necessarily need a lift chair to assist him up, but just by the fact of raising his chair above the ground a little bit higher, it allowed him to keep his independence. He was able to go about his day and be more independent and a lot safer. This one is just a couple 2x3s that were secured to each other. And we actually, per his request, we actually secured them to the floor itself. So it would not slide or ever move, no matter how hard he tried to force or fall back in it or anything else. That was just one option without buying a whole new chair. There are other cheaper options. If somebody's handy in your family, there are ways around it. One thing to note is when you're doing it is the bottom of the recliner chairs will also often vary on their base or how the frame is. This one had two bars going across the front and back. Some of them have them in the other orientation. So just something to consider and look into. All right, now we're out in the community or heading outside in the outside of the home with vehicles. Oftentimes, folks forget that they can adjust the height of the seat of their vehicle. Sometimes if they have a tall SUV or they're riding in a family member's vehicle that may be a little higher, oftentimes if it's a newer vehicle and it has automatic features, oftentimes you can actually lower the seat height itself, which may give them a little bit greater advantage to being able to get into the vehicle. You can also utilize running boards. There are really lightweight plastics platform steps you can purchase as well. They don't have to be like a full step stool, but it can even be like 3 inches high. And that can even be just enough assistance to let them put their foot on something to assist them in scooting back in the vehicle. Another option is parking extremely close to the curb. And that way you're raising the ground level up so that the height difference is a little less and more accommodating to a shorter individual. And right here, I have pictured on the top right, this is like a car handle assist device. And this shows, it basically goes into your door jamb, into the locking mechanism there. It can just provide a little bit of extra handle support for someone. Some people find it beneficial. It really depends on the vehicle, I find, and the way the door, I guess the width of the opening for the door. Sometimes it's more in your way than helpful. Other vehicles, depending on where the seat is, it may be further back and more of a beneficial position and place for them to actually use it. When they're out and about, surfaces to watch out for, curbs, any surface height changes, uneven cobblestone, brick, gravel, roots, slopes, anything, any surface that may be slippery and wet. Footwear. This is important not only around the house, but especially out in the community. You want to avoid high heels. Ideally, a flat, more low-profile shoe is going to be better. I highly recommend a shoe that has like a back to it. It's not an open sandal where their heel is exposed and they're likely to back up and then the slipper shoe slides off. And that kind of brings up the point. I did bring this shoe in here, especially for around the house. There are shoes that are extremely comfortable. This one's by Olokai. This is one of my personal shoe, and I love it. I got it as a Christmas gift. It's extremely comfortable. So your loved one doesn't have to give up the comfort of not being able to wear their slipper. They still can have a nice, comfortable shoe that they can slip on. It's really warm, fuzzy inside, but it has a really good rubber sole on the bottom, and it's extremely low profile. It's just a great option or alternative for folks. Headlamp. I highly recommend a headlamp. Some seniors are open to it. The main thing is it gives your hands are free. You can grab on, you can hold on to your assisted device, carry things around as you need. And then also you can get elastic shoelaces. If tying their shoes is an issue, maybe even their regular walking shoe, elastic shoelaces could be beneficial. There are a lot of technology out there. There's Apple Watch. It even has fall detection features where it'll notify and call for emergency services, as well as notify family members or anyone you designate. So that can be a great feature. It really, if your loved one lives alone or is often alone or out in the community, that can be a nice feature to assist them in getting set up. As I mentioned earlier, carry your cell phone or portable phone. You can also set up voice-activated calling. That way, if they have a harder time looking up the number or dialing it, you can teach them how to use Siri or something to make a call. There is also LifeAlert and other products you can look into. All right. Other things that can help, physical therapy. We can basically help evaluate and treat them, teach them basic exercises and even more complex exercises that are appropriate for them. Assist with selection and training on correct use of various assisted devices and aids. We can provide home assessments and modification recommendations, patient, caregiver, and family training on how to best assist their loved ones. Oftentimes, many seniors and their families feel that they are no longer able to remain living in their home, and they greatly feel like they're going to lose up their independence and their life of freedom of living in their home that they've worked so hard to get. The goal is basically to keep them living at home as long as possible and independent and functioning as well as they can. So basically, I love to strive to help people with that specific need. All right, I'll just briefly go. I know we're pushed for time. So what to do in case of your loved one falls: remain calm, don't panic, assess the situation. If unconscious or unresponsive, call 911, check their vital signs, look for obvious injuries, head trauma, broken bones, bleeding. Avoid moving them and keep them as still as possible. That way, in case they did injure their neck or have major head trauma, you will not do any further damage. Or if their joint is extremely out of place, where the bones stick out, we'll kind of minimize the harm until medical help can arrive. Let's see. And basically, if alert and responsive, make them comfortable, keep them as still as possible, ask for their level of discomfort, severe pain, throbbing, head, or lightheadedness. Look for obvious injuries again. Provide basic first aid if needed. And if you suspect a head injury or they report loss of sensation or movement, that could be maybe a spine injury or something, or neck injury. Back, you're better off not moving them and waiting for medical help to arrive. If there's no evidence of injury and you're able to, then you can safely assist them up, ideally with a lot of their help. If they're unable to help you, don't even attempt it. You're better off calling and getting a couple other people to assist you, or calling the fire department or someone else to come out and assist you. All right. Maximize the safety with assistive devices. I'll just go through it real quick. I was going to ask for volunteers, but I don't have time. All right. All right, so what we have here, this is a rollator walker. These are very great, beneficial, can give individuals a lot of independence and freedom in the community when used correctly. One thing you want to watch out for is you want to avoid this. A lot of times you'll see folks walking with it way out in front of them. The problem with that is now if they were to catch their toe or stumble, it's already so far ahead of them. They're going to pretty much go straight out on their stomachs. The other thing that's important to remind them on is to always keep your fingers where they can apply brake pressure, just like a bicycle. If your hands are on the brakes, you can stop it, and it'll give you the support they need. Oftentimes, people have a tendency to put their fingers above the brakes, and therefore you lose that benefit. The brakes are helpful on controlling their speed when going down in or slopes, as well as stepping on and off curbs. If you squeeze up on the brake, it gives you something sturdy for support as they lift their feet up and on the curb. Let's see, another thing about the rollators that's important is you want to make sure that the handles are, with all these devices, make sure the handles are adjusted for the most part. So when they're standing up, it's roughly where their watch would fall, or their wrist bends is typically a good recommendation as far as ideal height. Sometimes it's way too high, and then it causes shoulder pain, other issues. They're less likely to use it, and it's not as beneficial. As far as the brakes, I always encourage them to lock. I always tell them it's like a parking brake. They would never get out of their car without putting the car in park. It kind of goes with the brakes on these things. You want to push it down, and it'll permanently lock it so that it will not roll before they turn around and have a seat on it. You want to keep the brakes locked while you're sitting on it. That way, and getting up. That way, when you get up, the brakes stay locked. It'll give you some sense of support and stability until you're ready to continue. Periodically, you do want to check and make sure that the parking brake or the emergency brake on this is actually working over time, just like a bicycle or a car brake. It does need adjusting. So that's the main what's in that. Walker. Ideally, you want to make sure you stay inside of it. Just like the rollator, you want to walk ideally with it and not it walking you. So you want to avoid having it so far out in front of you. You want to try to remain inside of it, because that way, even if both my legs were to go out from under me, you could still support yourself long enough for them to get their foot back where it needs to be. Say if they took a wrong step, but at least give them a chance to be able to get their feet back underneath them to regain their balance. This here is a transport chair. It's a lighter weight transport chair. This can be very handy and helpful. This particular one does have brakes on the back for caregivers. So you can actually lock the brake if you're helping them out to the community. You can actually lock the brakes without having to bend over or be in a really tight spot where you may not be able to necessarily reach the brakes as well. This just saves your back and makes it easier on caregivers as well. So if you're looking for a transport chair for taking a loved one out in the community, sometimes this one can be helpful. Anytime before they get up out of a chair or transfer, I always recommend and make sure the brakes are always locked, regardless of what device it is. You also want to try to position it ideally 90 degrees from wherever you're transferring to. And that way, when you get up, it's pretty much just a simple step. And that brings up the point of leg rests. A lot of times on wheelchairs, leg rest, you want to make sure that they're moved out of the way. Sometimes, a lot of times, families will think just flipping up the footrest is enough. The only problem with that is it sticks out and protrudes in front of the chair and can also often pose a trip hazard and make you more likely to fall or get cuts and abrasions. Sorry, trying to rush through this last part. All right, and basically I won't read the summary to you because I know we're in a hurry. Any questions?
Did you say question?
Yes, questions.
I have a question about that cool transfer bathroom.
Yes, yep.
Is that something, how much would that be, or is that insurance? I don't know anything.
That one actually was, I found it specifically on Amazon. I want to say it was less than $200, I feel like.
Okay.
And so sometimes, I mean, yes, you can go through insurance, but sometimes that particular family needed it in a hurry and they didn't have time to deal with all the red tape. So it was cheaper and affordable enough for them that it was well worth it just to purchase it on Amazon. So it's, yeah, exactly. If it can help prevent a fall, if they had to wait a couple more days to get it, it would have been, yeah, it wasn't worth it. So, but it might be something that might be covered by insurance, but I have a feeling they're probably going to give you the bare minimum. They'll probably give you the hard plastic type, but this one is actually one that's comfortable, very supportive, and highly recommended. Right, so.
I was wondering about the Apple Watch.
Yes.
Can a person just have an Apple Watch and not have a cell phone?
Yes,
Okay.
that is a possibility. You would have to talk to a cell phone provider and add it to your account, but it would be like a separate, I'm pretty sure it's a separate line on your account.
Right.
Like, so if they don't have an Apple phone, you can actually make the watch work on its own with cell phone signal.
And are they able to go underwater? They probably.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I have an Apple Watch and I surf with it all the time and no problems at all with it.
Okay.
The only downside to Apple Watches is you do have to charge it pretty much every 24 hours. So you will be without it for maybe an hour, but if you can get in a routine, maybe when a caregiver's there giving them dinner or something, or perhaps you're with them or visiting, take it off, charge it. It really charges relatively quickly. And then they can put it back on.
And then if they have an emergency, then is it very simple to activate that?
I think you can program it where it'll automatically activate it and it'll even notify. I think you can set it up to where it'll even automatically notify family members or any emergency contacts as well.
Yeah, all right. I don't know. But what do you think about the Ring camera? My friend uses a Ring system for her mom. What do you think about that as far as, you know, she uses it like in different rooms in the house.
Oh yeah, I think it's a great option to be able to check up on folks too, especially if you may not be able to get by or there's no one to really run by and check on mom just throughout the day. I think having some type of service like that where you can log in remotely and just see where they're at or what they're up to and make sure that they're not on the floor, that can be helpful. I do remember working at another place, hearing stories about people that had laid on the floor for days. So I think having something like you're discussing could definitely be very beneficial, even if it's not to just check on their whereabouts all the time. You can always periodically check on them. Okay, they're doing all right. They're doing their normal routine. They're up in the sofa reading a book or whatever it may be.
And, you know, with the one we're talking about, it wouldn't be the case that she'd be there for longer than 24 hours, but that would be horrible.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know? And you know, even 4 or 5 hours stuck somewhere.
Yep, and I don't know, I have a Ring doorbell, but I don't know as much about their cameras, but I imagine you could even set up their cameras where it would probably notify you if there's motion or activity. So maybe if they change rooms, you could possibly program it to notify you that there was movement detected in a different room.
I think Nest
Okay, gotcha.
Brace option nest cameras.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
And I think but that is a great idea and probably something that could be very valuable and useful.
Yeah, it's really worked well for my friend.
So thanks for the great tip on adjusting bed height.
Perfect.
I've recommended that to people before, but what exactly is a good height?
Um,
Do you want it to hit the back of your knee where you're gonna sit down? Or what are we looking for there?
It's kind of
Jen,
more.
will you repeat the question, sorry?
The question was, what is an ideal bed height? What are you looking for when you're trying to determine what an ideal bed height is? General rule of thumb, you want to try to find a height that is going to allow them to be able to not only get up off of the bed, but also to be able to get into the bed safely. That can vary for each individual. And it really depends on their ability to get up. Some people have a easier time scooting. And so like, you really want to try to find that fine balance. And it kind of can be trial and error. You could almost start off maybe finding what height chair works for them to be able to scoot back on, and what chair they can easily get up from without armrests. And I guess the biggest thing is just, it's kind of a hard balance, but really trying to find one where they can still manage to scoot on it. They're not having to slide off the edge until their feet touch the ground.
So that was what I was gonna say. Should their feet always be able to touch the floor when they're
Yes.
sitting on the edge?
Yes,
Like,
yep.
with no drop at all?
Correct. I would agree with you. Your feet should be able to touch the floor at all times when you're sitting on the edge of the bed. Ideally, even more than just touch. I would say you should be able to have at least the ball of your foot down on the ground so you can help steady yourself when you first get up, and go from there.
Thank you.
No problem. Great question.
That extended grab bar that you showed
Yes.
in the bathroom?
Yep.
Was that custom made or?
No, it was that was also another Amazon purchase. Yeah, you can buy, like, a lot of times you can go to the Home Depot and other stores, but it's extremely hard to find that particular grab bar and other grab bars in stock anywhere. So sometimes I've had better luck just turning or going to Amazon to actually find the specific product or size I'm looking for. And oftentimes I can get it faster than they can get it in stock at a local store anyway. So
The rollator,
yes,
I've seen people use them more like a wheelchair,
yes,
and I've seen the wheels break off and people go to the ground because of that, because it's not a wheelchair, it's a rollator.
correct.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was something I hope to mention or demonstrate is a rollator is specifically designed for walking. This particular type is. It's not designed for your loved one to be sitting in and then pushing you. The problem that happens when that happens is they're here, you're pushing forward, all of a sudden the front wheels get caught on something and you're more likely to tumble over backwards. They do make a different type of rollator that it's kind of dual purpose, where it comes with the leg rest for the front, and you'd have the system around it, but they could sit on the other side of it with actual footrest. That can be a very handy tool if you're looking for something that's kind of dual purpose. Otherwise, this is probably a safer option, is having this plus a transport chair. But if it's a situation where you're really limited, you could consider a rollator walker similar to this one, except it would have a footrest on the other side of it, and then the backrest would actually flip all the way around. So they have some back support on this side as well. So, great point.
Any other questions?
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And he didn't mention
I
this.
didn't.
Oh, what were you saying?
Oh, I was gonna say, I do have a little handout over there of some useful information.
This one?
Yes, it's basically a safety checklist.
That's on that round table right
It's on the
there.
round table right there. And next to it, I do have just a little sign-up sheet if you're interested in additional information about some of these products. If you just put down your email address, periodically throughout the year, I'll try to send out maybe just one email every couple of months just to kind of update people on different products that I find helpful or beneficial for folks. So if you have interest in that, feel free to provide your information. And yeah, grab a checklist on your way out.
Right, and then he didn't mention this, but he's the owner of Wrightsville Beach Physical Therapy, and the cards are on your table also. But one of the benefits of someone who comes to the home is he's really looking at what is their environment, how are they working in the kitchen, where are their heights of their chairs. So it's a little bit different than going to a physical therapy office. So grab his card also. And also wanted to give our sponsor a chance to speak tonight. I know we're running a little bit late, but these programs are free to you because we have people that sponsor us. So I want to introduce to you Sue Fritz. She's with Cranfield Sumner, and they're another great resource for seniors.
I'll only take about an hour. I'm just.
You can still come up here, so you can come up here so that our streaming audience can see you also.
Yeah, but you have to be in front of the.
Oh,
camera. We want to see you.
And while she's coming up, if you fill out this form, if you're not getting our emails, you won't be inundated with emails. It's just 1 or 2 a month just to let you know about our program. And so you can fill that out.
Don't trip over the cords.
No falls.
I'm half of that stuff up there. I'm like, oh my God, the dog walking in front of me. Okay, I'm Sue Fritt, and I work with a wonderful elder law attorney named Kara Gansman at Cranfield Sumner. She does wills, trusts, probate, powers of attorney, long-term care planning, geriatric care management. When she needs or when clients come to her that need assistance finding facilities or services, then she brings me into the picture, and I help our clients, parents or whoever it might be, find home care, assisted living, memory care, skilled care, a new doctor, transport, whatever it is. I'll hold their hand through the whole process. I have information over there, some rack cards and some file folders that have more information and some goodies, so help yourself. So thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. We all need Dr. Jeff at home.
Thank you, Sue. The only other papers that are on your table, there's the program feedback form. If you can fill that out just to help guide us and how we can make our programs the best for you, and just leave them on the table or hand them to anybody with a green shirt. And then we also have our program schedule for the first 6 months of this year. So you'll see that next month we are on Valentine's Day. So you can avoid a busy restaurant on Valentine's Day and come here instead, and then have your Valentine's Day event on another night of the week. It's going to be Running on Empty, Caregiver Compassion Fatigue, and the presenter of that is from Lower Cape Fear Life Care. So that should be a great presentation as well. Whoops. And then another piece of paper on the very back table there in front of that kind of tree. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina, but it's Powerful Tools for Caregivers. It's a 6-week long program. You need to sign up by January 27th. So if you're interested in that, it's going to talk about reducing stress, emotion management, self-confidence, and identifying resources. So that flyer's back there. Our sponsors have information there. Jeff's information's on that table, and Sue's is on that table. And if you're streaming, I'm sorry, but email us and we'll give you the information. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for staying a few extra minutes. And if you have any questions for Dr. Jeff, he's up here. Any questions for Sue? She's over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
That was great. I'm sorry to rush you at the end. I was like, this is the good stuff right here.
What do you say? It says, yeah, you're probably like, come on, let's go.